A massive dam in Syria has held back a lake for nearly 2,000 years without a single motor. This is the reality of ancient water control, a testament to a forgotten genius. By the end of this, you will see ancient engineering not as primitive, but as a sophisticated logic we are only now relearning. How did cultures from Rome to Cambodia build reservoirs that still function today? And what hidden calculations allowed them to move mountains of earth with only simple tools? We will uncover the precise steps they followed, from reading a landscape like a map to forging materials that never leak. This journey reveals principles that could directly inspire solutions for our own climate-stressed world. What does it truly mean to build something that lasts for millennia? The most powerful engine in their world required no fuel and never broke down. It was gravity itself. Ancient engineers did not invent this force, but they mastered its language, learning to read the subtle whispers of a sloping hillside or the quiet promise of a distant plateau. Every decision, from the grandest dam to the smallest irrigation ditch, began with a single question: where does the water naturally want to go? Their entire logic was built on coaxing that flow, not fighting it. This was the prime mover, the silent, relentless partner in every project. To harness it, they became expert readers of an invisible map, the map of elevation. They needed to know not just where a spring emerged from the earth, but how high that point was relative to the city that needed its water, sometimes dozens of miles away. The precision required was breathtaking. For water to flow smoothly without stagnating or eroding its channel, the slope had to be almost imperceptibly gentle. Roman aqueducts, for example, often descended only a few feet for every mile they traveled. Achieving this over rugged terrain meant conducting surveys of staggering accuracy without lasers or satellites. They used simple tools like chorobates, a long, water-leveled wooden frame, to find true level across valleys. It was a painstaking art of patience and observation, where a single misjudgment could mean a costly, stagnant canal. This philosophy went beyond mere technique. It represented a fundamental harmony with the environment. These builders were not conquerors of the landscape, but collaborators. They understood that the most sustainable, resilient system was one that aligned with nature's own gradients. Their reservoirs were always placed at the highest practical point, becoming batteries of potential energy. Gravity would then do the rest, delivering life to terraced fields and public fountains with a reliability that outlasted empires. In our modern world, where we so often use immense energy to defy gravity, pumping water uphill and battling natural flows, there is a profound lesson in this ancient elegance. Their first and most critical step was simply learning to see what the land was already telling them. This deep reading of the earth directly informed the next phase, where they had to make a monumental choice: to contain the water or to guide it. The blueprint began not on parchment but in the mud and the wind. This first critical step was an act of profound listening, a comprehensive hydrological survey that transformed the entire landscape into a living map. Before any trench was dug or any dam conceived, ancient engineers spent seasons, sometimes years, simply observing. They were not just looking for water, they were learning to speak its language. They tracked the subtle paths animals took to hidden springs, noting how certain plants thrived in areas where groundwater lay close to the surface. They studied the color and texture of soil, the way fog gathered in a particular valley at dawn, all as clues to an invisible system. Their tools were elegantly simple, sighting rods to mark lines of elevation across vast distances, and water levels to find true flatness for their future canals. In the flat river plains of Mesopotamia, teams would place a series of marked poles in a straight line for miles, using nothing but their line of sight to ensure a perfect, gentle slope for water to travel. This was more than surveying, it was a form of deep environmental intelligence. They were mapping the entire watershed, predicting not just where the water was, but where it would be during the brutal dry season or the sudden, violent floods. They understood the rhythm of the ecosystem and designed their systems to move with it, not against it. This holistic approach is what we might call proto-GIS mapping today, turning qualitative observations of nature into a quantitative plan for survival. What can we learn from this patience? In an age of instant satellite data, we might overlook the value of truly knowing a place, of reading its long-term patterns and integrating our designs within them. This meticulous mapping gave them the confidence to attempt the impossible because they knew with startling clarity exactly what the land could support. With a map complete in their minds, the real work could begin, the monumental task of moving Earth itself on an almost unimaginable scale. The landscape itself became their canvas, and their tools were extensions of human will. With shovels of wood and stone, woven baskets slung over shoulders, and simple levers, they embarked on a second step of staggering ambition, earth-moving and terrain sculpting on a scale that defies belief. This was not random digging, it was a precise surgical operation performed on the body of the Earth. Envision thousands of workers moving in coordinated lines, cutting into hillsides to carve out canals, or piling excavated soil into massive embankments that would become the walls of a reservoir. The logic was deeply geometric and volumetric. They had to calculate exactly how much earth to remove to create a storage basin that could hold a specific volume of life-giving water, or to shape a channel with just the right gradient to keep water flowing without eroding its own banks. This required an intuitive grasp of soil mechanics, understanding which slopes would hold and which would collapse, knowledge gained through generations of trial and observation. In the rock-cut city of Petra, the Nabateans performed what seems like magic, carving intricate conduit systems and water channels directly into the faces of sheer sandstone cliffs, guiding every precious drop of rainfall into vast, hidden cisterns. Their technique was a masterclass in cut and fill, where the material dug from one area was not waste, but a vital resource used to build up terraces for agriculture or to reinforce the very dams that would hold the water. Perhaps the most breathtaking example is the Duzhongyan system in China, constructed over 2,000 years ago and still functioning today. There, engineers did not build a dam in the conventional sense. Instead, they orchestrated the river itself. Using a massive, coordinated labor force, they constructed a long, artificial island in the middle of a raging river to split its flow, and cut a channel through a mountain to divert water onto the arid Chengdu plain. This was environmental engineering of the highest order, a dialogue with a powerful natural force that resulted in harmony rather than conquest. The sheer volume of earth and stone moved by hand for projects like these is almost incomprehensible. It forces a compelling question: how did they organize such monumental human effort without any modern machinery? The secret lies in the social architecture that supported the physical engineering, a story of community and shared purpose we will soon uncover. But before that social engine could prove its worth, the raw earth they shaped needed to be transformed into something permanent, something that could hold water against its constant, patient desire to escape. Water is a relentless escape artist, and these massive reservoirs were its ultimate prison. The third, and perhaps most ingenious, step in the ancient engineer's logic was not about moving earth but transforming it. They had to invent a skin for their creations, a permanent, impermeable lining that could defy the constant, seeping pressure of millions of gallons. This was a deep dive into material science, using the very ground beneath their feet to craft a barrier stronger than stone. In the Great Bath at Mohenjo-Daro, the solution was a sandwich of perfection. Builders layered fine clay, compacting each stratum with meticulous care, creating a laminated seal that behaved almost like a geologic formation. The clay particles would swell when wet, naturally plugging any microscopic gaps, a self-healing technology crafted from mud. Half a world away, Roman engineers developed a recipe that would change construction forever, a waterproof concrete they called opus signinum. This was no ordinary mix. They combined slaked lime with crushed pottery and a magical ingredient, volcanic ash known as pozzolana. The chemical reaction created a crystalline structure that was not just strong, but utterly resistant to water, lining the channels of their aqueducts so effectively that some still hold water today. The Maya, facing the porous limestone of their jungle home, devised another brilliant adaptation. They mined a soft, white marl called sascab, mixing it with lime and the sticky sap of local trees to create a plaster that dried into a glass-smooth, waterproof membrane for their reservoir floors. The logic behind each recipe was both chemical and profoundly practical. They were engineering materials to perform specific functions, to swell, to interlock, to crystallize into a seamless shield. This was an early, rigorous form of quality control. We have evidence that samples were tested for porosity, likely by seeing how quickly they absorbed water, ensuring only the most effective mixes were used on a grand scale. This meticulous attention to the microscopic world is what gave their macroscopic structures longevity. A single leak could mean the difference between a city thriving and a harvest failing, so they left nothing to chance. But creating a static, watertight bowl was only half the battle. Once filled, that placid reservoir became a sleeping giant of potential energy, and channeling that force required a fourth kind of genius, the art of controlled release. Even a placid reservoir is a sleeping giant of stored force. Water is deceptively heavy, and the fourth critical step in the ancient engineer's logic was a mastery of structural engineering, of designing bones strong enough to contain and direct that immense hydraulic pressure. They were not just building walls, they were crafting intelligent skeletons that could channel weight, resist push, and flex without breaking. The simplest and most profound principle was the gravity dam, where the sheer mass of the structure itself became the answer. At the Kalani Dam in India, a marvel still in use after 2,000 years, engineers stacked massive, uncemented stones into a trapezoidal shape. This was a stroke of genius in cross-section, wider at the base than at the top. This design efficiently funneled the colossal weight of the impounded water down and outward into the solid earth below, preventing the entire wall from being pushed over. It was architecture as a direct conversation with physics, using form to manage force. The Romans took this logic of weight distribution to another level with their iconic arches. When you see a Roman aqueduct marching across a valley, those graceful curves are not merely for beauty. Each arch is a brilliant machine for channeling load. The weight of the water channel above and the masonry itself is transferred along the curve of the stone, pushing downward into the sturdy piers below. This allowed them to span gaps that a solid wall could not, carrying water across impossible terrain with an elegance that modern engineers still admire. But containing pressure was only half the battle. They also had to design for its safe release. Ancient builders understood that a rigid structure is a doomed one. They incorporated dynamic pressure release valves directly into their designs. Carefully engineered spillways and overflow channels were carved into dam faces or built alongside them. These were not afterthoughts, they were integral to the system's survival. During a flood, when water levels threatened to overtop a dam with catastrophic force, these channels would activate, allowing excess water to cascade away in a controlled, stepped fashion, dissipating its energy harmlessly. This demonstrated a profound, dynamic understanding of forces, ensuring stability not just in a static moment, but through the relentless cycles of wet and dry seasons. How did they perform these calculations without the mathematics we have today? Their knowledge was empirical, built through generations of observation and undoubtedly through learning from failures. They understood scale and proportion intuitively, knowing through experience how thick a wall needed to be for a given height of water, or how wide a spillway must be to handle a seasonal surge. This hard-won wisdom, etched in stone and earth, created the stable backbone for the final, most delicate act of the entire system, the precise and equitable distribution of this life-giving resource to every field and home. The true test of any water system came not in the grand reservoir, but in the final mile. A vast lake of potential is useless if it cannot reach a single thirsty field or a neighborhood fountain. This fifth critical step transformed engineering into a delicate art, the precise hydraulics of flow distribution through a vast, branching network. It was here that water met society, and the logic shifted from containment to allocation, from force to fairness. Ancient engineers had to solve a puzzle of fluid dynamics with nothing but gravity and geometry. How do you ensure that a farmer at the far end of a 10-mile canal receives his fair share, while also supplying public baths and preventing any single channel from silting up or washing away? Their solutions were masterpieces of controlled release. In the high deserts of Persia, the Qanat system achieved this with quiet brilliance. These were not open canals, but gently sloping underground tunnels, often miles long, that tapped into mountain aquifers. The tunnels would emerge at the surface at carefully spaced intervals, creating a series of oases from a single, hidden source. This design minimized evaporation in the brutal sun and used the natural slope of the land to maintain a steady, manageable flow to multiple destinations. Above ground, the distribution was managed with elegant mechanical logic. Simple wooden or stone sluice gates acted as valves, raised or lowered to meter the water into different branches. Division boxes, small masonry structures where a main channel split, used precisely carved notches in their walls to apportion fixed percentages of the flow, ensuring a predictable and dispute-free allocation. The Romans institutionalized this precision on an urban scale. Before water even reached a city, it would often pass through a series of settling tanks, where the flow slowed enough for silt and debris to fall out, protecting the delicate distribution network from clogging. The clean water then arrived at a Castellum Divisorium, a distribution tower that functioned as the city's water headquarters. From this central node, large lead or ceramic pipes would carry water under pressure to public fountains, baths, and the homes of the elite. The size of each pipe's opening and the slope of its path determined its share, a permanent physical record of civic priority. This systematic apportionment required an intuitive, yet advanced grasp of principles we now call fluid dynamics. They understood that water moving too quickly would erode its channel, while water moving too slowly would deposit silt and stagnate. By varying the width and depth of their canals, they could fine-tune the velocity, keeping everything in a perfect, self-cleansing balance. This network was far more than plumbing. It was the physical manifestation of a social contract. The design of the distribution system directly reflected the values and needs of the community, prioritizing drinking water, then agriculture, then industry. It was a tool for peace, as reliable, transparent water allocation prevented conflict. It also demanded a new kind of intelligence, not just of materials and forces, but of law, economy, and human nature. Who, then, was entrusted with the immense responsibility of maintaining this balance and enforcing this contract? The answer lies in the sixth and final pillar of their logic, the social and administrative architecture that turned brilliant engineering into enduring civilization. A brilliant canal is useless without the hands to dig it and the minds to remember how. The sixth and final pillar of this ancient logic was not made of stone or clay, but of people and time, a sophisticated social engine that transformed monumental vision into enduring reality. The common image of slave gangs toiling under a whip collapses under the weight of evidence. These were often projects of shared destiny, built by organized, incentivized communities who understood that their collective sweat was an investment in their own survival. In the Khmer Empire, the vast Barre reservoirs surrounding Angkor were likely constructed using a corvée labor system. This was not random conscription, but a structured civic duty, a form of tax paid in time, typically during the dry season when farming was impossible. Villagers would contribute a set period of work, often provided with food and shelter, understanding that the reservoir they helped build would water their own rice paddies in the coming year. This created a direct, tangible link between individual effort and communal reward, turning a massive engineering project into a shared enterprise. The knowledge required to execute such projects was not held by a single genius, but was a living, growing body of collective intelligence. It was passed down through specialized guilds or family lineages, masters apprenticing the next generation in a sacred trust of technique. The Inca had their miembros, hereditary guilds of hydraulic engineers who knew precisely how to fit stones for a canal so that not even a knife blade could slip between them. In Mesopotamia, scribes meticulously recorded canal dimensions and water allocations on clay tablets, creating the first operational manuals for civic infrastructure. This was a cumulative science where each generation learned from the successes and, crucially, the failures of the last, slowly refining the art of reading landscapes and managing flows. This deep reservoir of practical knowledge was the true foundation of their resilience. The logic was profoundly socio-economic. Water security meant food security, which in turn meant political stability and prosperity. By investing communal labor, a society was not just moving earth, it was weaving a stronger social fabric, creating a shared stake in the system's success. This collective buy-in was often reinforced through culture and ritual. Annual festivals would mark the cleaning of canals or the opening of sluice gates, turning essential maintenance into a celebration that honored the water deities and reminded everyone of their interconnected role. These systems became woven into the very identity of the civilization, a source of pride and a pillar of cultural continuity. How did they know when to mobilize thousands or when to open a particular gate? The entire endeavor pulsed to a rhythm dictated by the ultimate timekeeper, the seasons themselves, demanding a final layer of genius in predictive management and long-term adaptation. Time itself was a material they learned to shape. The ancient engineers' ultimate mastery was not just over space, but over the fourth dimension, weaving their entire system into the relentless, predictable heartbeat of the natural world. Their reservoirs and canals were not static monuments, but dynamic instruments, finely tuned to the rhythms of seasons, stars, and floods. This was the temporal blueprint, a logic of synchronization that turned engineering into a continuous, anticipatory dialogue with the environment. Every action, from grand construction to routine maintenance, was choreographed to a celestial and hydrological calendar. The most obvious pulse was the seasonal drought. They knew that to repair a dam or dredge a silt-choked canal, they needed the water level at its lowest, so the dry season, when farming was impossible, became the time for communal labor, transforming idle hands into a maintenance corps that ensured the system's health for the coming year. This was efficiency born of necessity, aligning human effort with nature's quiet moments. But some rhythms were grander. In Egypt, civilization itself danced to the annual inundation of the Nile. Egyptian engineers did not try to stop this flood, they designed to embrace it. Their basin irrigation scheme was a masterpiece of temporal capture. They built low earthen walls to create vast, shallow cells across the floodplain. When the Nile rose, these basins would fill, trapping the water and the rich silt it carried. Then, through carefully managed sluices, they would release this captured bounty slowly over the following weeks, extending the growing season far beyond the flood's retreat. Their entire agricultural year, their very calendar, was built around predicting and harnessing this single, life-giving event. This anticipatory logic reached for the sky. The Maya, in the unpredictable rainforest, faced a different challenge, not annual floods, but the precise timing of rains. Their survival depended on knowing when the rainy season would begin to fill their reservoirs and when the dry season would start to drain them. Evidence suggests they used their profound astronomical knowledge, tracking the movements of Venus and the Sun, to develop a calendar that could predict these seasonal shifts with remarkable accuracy. A reservoir was not just a tank, it was a battery to be charged at the right celestial moment. In this way, stone alignments and temple observatories were as crucial to water security as the plaster lining the reservoir floor. The calendar and the star chart became essential tools, every bit as important as the surveyor's level. This deep, cyclical connection to natural timing was the final safeguard for sustainability. It prevented systems from being overwhelmed by unexpected floods or rendered useless by premature drought. It created a resilient buffer, a way to smooth out nature's irregularities. This invites a fascinating question. How did they embed this knowledge of time into the very landscape? Some structures themselves served as giant clocks, their shadows or alignments marking solstices and equinoxes, signaling the time to plant, to harvest, or to open the sluice gates. The engineering was never finished. It was a perpetual conversation, a legacy of observation passed down through generations who understood that to master water, you first had to master time. A dam was never just a wall of stone. It was a bridge, a plaza, a place to meet the gods. Ancient engineers understood that to truly endure, a structure must serve the soul as well as the soil, becoming inseparable from the rhythm of daily life. This principle of architectural multifunctionality transformed utilitarian infrastructure into the vibrant, beating heart of a community. Take the colossal dam at Lake Homs in Syria, a Roman marvel nearly 2,000 years old. Its primary function was to create a vast reservoir, but its wide, flat crest was deliberately engineered to serve a second, equally vital purpose, a major paved roadway. This was efficiency incarnate. The same massive investment in labor and stone now solved two critical problems at once: water security and transportation. A trader moving goods between cities, a farmer bringing produce to market, a soldier on patrol, all would travel across this hydrological giant, their journeys literally supported by the silent lake beneath them. This dual identity meant the dam's maintenance was not a specialized chore for waterkeepers alone. It was essential upkeep for a public highway, ensuring its care was woven into the routine priorities of the entire region. This fusion of the practical and the profound reached its zenith in the stepwells of the Indian subcontinent, like the breathtaking Chand Bayori. Descending its 3,500 symmetrically carved steps is like walking into the earth itself. On one level, it is a masterpiece of hydrological access designed to reach deep, fluctuating groundwater tables through the driest seasons, but it is simultaneously a sublime architectural space. The steps create a vast inverted pyramid, a cool, sheltered microclimate where temperatures can drop dramatically compared to the scorching surface. This made it a natural social hub, a place where women gathering water could also share news, where travelers could find respite from the heat, and where communities would congregate. Critically, the deepest levels often housed ornate pavilions and shrines, turning the act of drawing water into a devotional journey. The water source and the spiritual source became one and the same, sanctifying the entire system. The logic here was one of profound symbolic integration, a structure that provided water, transportation, social space, and a connection to the divine, maximized its value to the community in every conceivable way. This holistic design philosophy meant that maintaining the water system was synonymous with maintaining the cultural and economic heart of the city. In places like the Reservoir of the Sun Temple in the Khmer city of Ko-Kur, the vast artificial lake was not hidden on the outskirts. It was the centerpiece of the urban plan, directly aligned with the temple pyramid. Its waters mirrored the heavens, and its banks were likely lined with sculptures and ghats for ceremonial use. The reservoir was a civic center, an aesthetic wonder, and a theological statement all in one. This deep integration offers a compelling answer to why so many of these systems displayed such remarkable resilience across centuries. When a dam is also your main road, you repair it promptly. When a stepwell is your temple, you protect it fervently. When a reservoir is your town square, you keep it clean and functional. Multifunctionality created a web of dependencies and affections, embedding the water system into the very identity of the people it served. Its preservation became a matter of cultural survival, not just technical upkeep. This strategic intertwining of function and meaning ensured that these hydrological giants were cherished, generation after generation, as the literal and spiritual wellspring of civilization itself. A reservoir could be a weapon as much as a wellspring. This seventh layer of ancient logic moved beyond physics and into the stark realities of power, where water infrastructure became a primary tool of geopolitics. Controlling the flow of water meant controlling the fate of nations, turning canals and dams into instruments of statecraft, diplomacy, and sometimes coercion. The strategic placement of these systems was a calculated move on a grand chessboard. Consider the Assyrian king Sennacherib in the 8th century before the Common Era. He did not merely order a canal to water his capital, Nineveh. He commissioned a monumental 50-mile-long aqueduct and channel system, an engineering marvel that crossed valleys on stone arches. This project was agricultural, yes, but its deeper purpose was a brilliant political statement. By guaranteeing a reliable water supply to the heart of his empire, he secured the loyalty of his own people, demonstrating the tangible benefits of his rule. Simultaneously, the sheer scale of the project was a display of raw imperial might, a message carved into the landscape itself to any rival or rebellious province. Witness our power to reshape the very earth. The location of a dam was often a deliberate strategic asset. Placing a major reservoir upstream from your city was a defensive necessity, ensuring your own supply. But placing one upstream from a rival could create a terrifying dependency, a hydraulic sword of Damocles. In the intricate politics of ancient Mesopotamia, controlling a key diversion point on the Tigris or Euphrates gave a city-state immense leverage over its neighbors downstream. This reality could spark conflict, but it could also force unprecedented cooperation. Historical records show treaties between Mesopotamian city-states specifically governing water sharing, establishing quotas and maintenance responsibilities. These may be some of the world's earliest documented international water agreements, born from the grim understanding that mutual destruction awaited if the system failed. The engineering logic, therefore, extended directly into political science. An engineer was not just solving a technical problem of gradient and volume, they were often executing a state agenda. Their blueprints served to consolidate royal power, ensure a capital's autonomy during a siege, or create economic dependencies that bound outlying regions to the center. This political dimension directly influenced the scale and ambition of projects. A pharaoh's legacy was measured in granaries filled, and those granaries required water, leading to ever larger basin irrigation schemes. A king's prestige was demonstrated by the grandeur of his public fountains and baths, fed by aqueducts that bore his name. The need for control inevitably raised a parallel need for protection. If water was the ultimate strategic resource, how did these civilizations shield their lifelines from both human sabotage and the relentless, patient threats posed by nature itself? Their mastery of water was a double-edged sword, a source of life that could become a devastating vulnerability. The very reservoirs that nourished empires made them targets, and the canals that fed cities could be turned into weapons of siege. This reality birthed a seventh, often overlooked, layer of ancient logic: defensive hydrology, the art of protecting the lifeline from both human malice and nature's fury. These systems were not just engineered for function, they were fortified for survival. The first line of defense was often concealment and integration. In many fortified cities, the main water channels were deliberately routed inside the massive perimeter walls, ensuring that during a siege, the enemy could not simply dam or divert the supply upstream. The inlets to crucial cisterns were sometimes hidden beneath temple floors or within palace courtyards, known only to a trusted few. The Persians perfected this art of secrecy with their canal systems. These life-giving underground tunnels, which stretched for miles from mountain aquifer to desert oasis, were vulnerable at their vulnerable surface shafts. To protect them, access points were camouflaged, often located in remote, defensible areas or disguised as natural features, making it nearly impossible for an invading army to locate and poison the source. This was security through obscurity, an understanding that the best defense was to hide the heart of the system entirely. But defense was not just about secrecy, it was about designing for chaos. Ancient engineers thought like chess masters, anticipating moves several steps ahead. They built in redundant spillways, overflow channels that could handle not just a typical flood, but a once-in-a-generation deluge that would otherwise topple their dams. Upstream of major reservoirs, they constructed elaborate sediment traps, basins where the rushing water would slow and drop its load of silt and debris before it could choke the main storage area. These were not afterthoughts, they were core components of the design, acknowledging that nature is unpredictable and that failure was not an option. The pinnacle of this passive safety logic is still in operation at Duzhongyan in China. Its dividing levee, the fish mouth, is a stroke of genius in risk management. During normal flow, the levee gently diverts a portion of the river into the irrigation network. But when floodwaters surge, the design cleverly inverts the priority. The rising torrent simply pours over the top of the levee, bypassing the delicate canals entirely and rushing harmlessly down the main river channel. The system protects itself, automatically sacrificing a little irrigation water to save the entire infrastructure from destruction. This represents a profound philosophical shift, from designing for ideal conditions to engineering for resilience against the worst possible scenarios. They accepted that breakdowns and disasters would occur, and they architected graceful failures, ways for the system to degrade safely rather than collapse catastrophically. This foresight required a deep, long-term perspective, an understanding that a civilization's true test was not in its glorious construction, but in its enduring function across centuries of conflict and climatic shifts. That endurance, however, hinged on a final, fragile element, a cultural discipline that could not be carved in stone, the unbroken chain of knowledge and care passed from one generation to the next. The true longevity of these systems lay not in the stone but in the calendar. A dam could stand for centuries, but without a relentless rhythm of care, it would be just a forgotten wall in a silt-choked valley. Ancient societies understood this implicitly, and so they engineered something equally vital, a maintenance regime woven from ritual, legal duty, and unbroken technical practice. This was the living heartbeat of the system, the daily and seasonal work that transformed a static monument into a resilient, breathing organism. In ancient Rome, this responsibility was formalized into a high-status office, the Curator Aquarum. This was no simple bureaucrat, but a respected public figure entrusted with the lifeblood of the city. His teams of skilled workers, the Aquarii, walked the entire length of the aqueducts, from mountain spring to urban distribution tank, inspecting every arch, clearing vegetation from channels, and patching cracks with that miraculous waterproof concrete. Their work was preventative, a philosophy of constant, small repairs to avert a single, catastrophic failure. This logic of shared stewardship found perhaps its most elegant expression in the Subak system of Bali. Here, the water from a single volcanic spring feeds a cascading network of canals serving hundreds of separate rice terraces. The farmers who depend on this water are organized into a Subak, a democratic cooperative. They meet regularly not in a government office, but at a water temple, where discussions of irrigation schedules and canal cleaning duties are intertwined with prayers and offerings to the rice goddess Dewi Sri. The technical and the spiritual are inseparable, maintenance becomes a sacred duty, and social harmony is as important as hydraulic efficiency. Penalties for stealing water or neglecting a shared canal are enforced by the community itself, ensuring fairness is maintained. This communal model was often codified in law. Cuneiform tablets from Mesopotamia detail strict penalties for anyone who damaged a canal or took more than their allotted share of water. In the Inca Empire, the Mita labor tax system ensured that every household contributed time not just to building projects, but to the essential annual maintenance of terraces and canals. The logic was profoundly practical, a simple matter of effort. Dredging a few feet of silt from a canal each dry season was a manageable community task. Letting that silt accumulate for a decade would require a mobilization akin to building the canal all over again. By institutionalizing upkeep, they made the system self-perpetuating. This culture of stewardship, where every user had a direct role and responsibility, is the unsung hero of these ancient marvels. It created a feedback loop of care, knowledge, and collective identity that guarded the system against the slow creep of entropy. The very fact that we can study the polished plaster of a Mayan reservoir or trace the precise gradient of a Roman aqueduct today is a direct testament to generations of anonymous hands that cleaned, patched, and remembered. Their enduring legacy now offers us a new kind of clue, not just in the stones they left behind, but in the very soil and sediment that recorded their rhythms, a field of science that reads the landscape like a historical ledger. The silent stones and empty reservoirs only whisper their secrets. To truly hear them, we have become detectives of dust and sediment, using a suite of modern tools to reverse engineer the thoughts of long-vanished builders. This field, Archaeohydrology, is a kind of forensic science for landscapes where the goal is not to find treasure, but to reconstruct a forgotten logic. The first challenge is that these systems are rarely intact, often buried under centuries of soil or swallowed by jungle. To see them again, scientists deploy tools like ground-penetrating radar, which sends pulses of energy into the earth, painting a picture of buried walls, channels, and foundations without ever lifting a shovel. From the air, LiDAR technology uses laser pulses to strip away dense forest canopy, revealing the ghostly imprints of massive earthworks, canals, and terraces hidden for 1,000 years, transforming a seemingly wild landscape into a meticulously engineered grid. But these tools only show the skeleton. To understand the lifeblood, the water itself, researchers turn to more subtle clues. They drill deep into the dried beds of ancient reservoirs, extracting long cylinders of sediment, cores that act like a timeline of the lake's history. Each layer, like a page in a book, holds pollen, charcoal, and chemical signatures. By reading this archive, scientists can reconstruct not just when the reservoir was in use, but also the quality of the water, the intensity of droughts, and even the surrounding agricultural practices. Perhaps the most intimate clue comes from the aqueducts themselves. Inside the stone channels of Roman waterworks, a thin, layered deposit called sinter slowly accumulates, much like mineral scale in a kettle. This sinter is a chemical diary. By analyzing its isotopes and trace elements, researchers can determine the original source of the water, its temperature, and even calculate the flow rate with surprising precision. revealing how much water a city like Rome was actually consuming at the height of its power. Each of these techniques is a piece of a larger interdisciplinary puzzle, combining archaeology, geology, chemistry, and engineering. A discovery might be as small as a peculiar mineral deposit in a corner, indicating a long-lost sluice gate for flushing sediment, or as large as a LiDAR map showing an entire watershed sculpted into a single, integrated management system. What these scientific detectives consistently reveal is a staggering depth of planning and a sophisticated adaptability. We find evidence of canals being widened after a period of increased rainfall, or spillways being reinforced in response to a major flood. These were not static monuments, but dynamic systems that were observed, measured, and tweaked across generations. This challenges a persistent assumption that pre-industrial technology was simplistic or static. Instead, we see a rigorous empirical science of trial, observation, and refinement, one that managed variable climates with a foresight we are only now beginning to fully appreciate. This scientific portrait of their adaptability raises a profound and urgent question. How does this ancient, time-tested logic speak to our own modern crisis of water in a changing climate? The ancient engineers' ultimate test was not a single flood or drought, but the relentless, unpredictable swing between them. These builders were master adapters, designing not for a stable ideal, but for the harsh climatic extremes that defined their homelands. Their logic was one of profound resilience, creating systems that could buffer against both scarcity and surplus, often within the same year. In the blistering aridity of the American Southwest, the Hohokam culture faced a river that was more a suggestion than a promise, the Erratic Salt River. Their response was a network of over 500 miles of canals, an arterial system etched into the desert. But their genius lay in the details, the intricate headgates and diversion weirs that could be adjusted to siphon off the maximum amount of water during a brief surge, capturing every possible drop before it vanished into the sand. Yet they also knew that same river could transform in an instant into a devastating torrent. So they engineered overflow channels alongside their main canals, sacrificial pathways designed to safely carry away flash flood energy before it could obliterate their carefully tended fields. This was a dual strategy, a delicate dance between capture and release, tailored to an environment of feast and famine. Half a world away, in the monsoon-driven landscape of ancient Sri Lanka, a different but equally elegant solution emerged. Here, engineers constructed vast, shallow reservoirs known as tanks. The real innovation was not in a single tank, but in their connection. They built them in cascading chains down gentle slopes. When the monsoon rains arrived, the first and highest tank would fill. Once it reached capacity, its carefully calibrated spillway would discharge the excess water not into a wasteful runoff, but directly into the next tank downstream. That tank would fill and overflow to the next, and so on down the line. This cascading system acted like a giant staircase for water, capturing and slowing the monsoon's bounty, distributing it across the landscape, and creating a linked reserve that could be tapped methodically during the long, rainless months. The logic was brilliant in its simplicity, using gravity and sequence to transform a seasonal deluge into a year-round lifeline. At the heart of both these approaches and countless others was a deep, long-term understanding of local climate patterns. This was knowledge not from a single lifetime, but accumulated over generations, likely encoded in oral histories, stories, and rituals that marked memorable droughts or hundred-year floods. They were designing for cycles we can now see in tree rings and sediment cores, multi-year droughts and extreme rainfall events. Their solutions were inherently decentralized and nature-based. Instead of a single, massive, vulnerable dam, they built many smaller, interconnected tanks. Instead of trying to completely tame a flash flood, they gave it a designated path of least resistance. This philosophy of working with the landscape's own rhythms, of creating redundancy and buffers, stands in stark contrast to much of our modern, centralized infrastructure, which often aims to control and define natural variability. Their legacy asks us a pressing question in our era of climate uncertainty. Are we building monuments to control, or are we designing systems that can adapt, absorb, and endure through the coming swings? This ancient wisdom points toward a future where resilience is woven into the design from the very beginning. Their greatest innovation was not invention, but imitation. The most resilient ancient water systems achieved longevity by doing something profound yet simple. They stopped trying to conquer the watershed and instead learned to replicate its genius. This principle of ecological integration meant engineering became an act of careful mimicry, enhancing nature's own processes rather than replacing them. Take the floating gardens of the Aztecs, the Chinampas. These were not plots of land that needed water brought to them. They were literally extensions of the lake itself. Builders would weave rectangular frames from reeds and stakes, then fill them with layers of mud and decaying vegetation dredged from the lake bottom. These fertile islands were anchored to the lakebed. The magic was in the design. The porous, organic material of the Chinampa acted like a sponge. Through capillary action, water from the surrounding lake would naturally wick upward into the roots of the crops, providing constant, self-regulating irrigation. The system required no pumps, no sluice gates. It was a manufactured wetland that thrived on the same principles as a natural marsh, filtering water, supporting aquatic life, and producing immense agricultural yields in a perfectly balanced loop. Similarly, the Katara systems of North Africa, ancient cousins to the Persian Qanat, demonstrate a deep respect for the aquifer's natural rhythm. These gently sloping underground tunnels tap into water at the foot of a mountain, guiding it to the surface through gravity alone. The design is intentionally passive, drawing only what the aquifer can sustainably yield without lowering the water table. It mimics the slow, steady seep of a natural spring, maintaining the long-term health of the groundwater source rather than mining it dry. This logic of biomimicry extended to every scale. Engineers observed how a mature forest manages rainfall, with its canopy breaking the force of droplets, its leaf litter absorbing moisture, and its roots stabilizing soil. They then engineered their terraced hillsides to function similarly, using stone walls to slow runoff and increase infiltration, just like tree roots. They saw how a meandering river reduces its own erosive power, and they designed their canal bends with gentle curves to achieve the same effect. The result was infrastructure that didn't just exist in the landscape, it became a beneficial part of it. Reservoirs were not sterile holding tanks, they were often designed as rich ecosystems. The stepped sides of tanks in Sri Lanka and India created varied microhabitats, supporting algae, aquatic plants, fish, and migratory birds. These species weren't just accidental visitors, they were part of the system's health, helping to clean the water and control insects. The water body served multiple purposes: aquaculture, irrigation, and biodiversity support, all woven into one. This symbiotic relationship stands in stark contrast to the often extractive, single-purpose approach of many modern concrete channels and dams, which can simplify and degrade ecosystems. The ancient model presents a compelling question for today's environmental engineers. What if our flood control systems were designed to function more like natural floodplains, absorbing and slowly releasing water? What if our cities could capture and filter rainwater like a forest floor, rather than rushing it all away as waste? This holistic thinking recognized that beauty was not separate from function, but its ultimate expression. The reservoirs that mirrored the sky, the canals that flowed like gentle streams, these were testaments to an understanding that what worked in harmony with nature was often inherently graceful. This aesthetic sensibility, where utility and artistry merged, would become one of their most enduring legacies, shaping not just landscapes, but the very identity of the cultures they sustained. The most elegant curve was always the one that served a purpose. For the ancient mind, beauty was not a decorative afterthought slapped onto a functional object. It was the natural, visible expression of perfect function itself. This aesthetic of utility transformed the entire water system from hidden machinery into a public celebration, where every architectural choice solved a physical problem while nourishing the human spirit. Consider the iconic Roman fountain. Its roaring cascades and sculpted basins were far more than civic ornament. The very act of forcing water through intricate spouts and over-carved figures introduced life-giving air into the supply, improving its taste and quality. The splashing display served a hygienic purpose, while simultaneously announcing the empire's mastery over nature to every citizen who paused to drink. It was propaganda in water form, a statement that said our power is so absolute, we can afford to make our necessity into art. This philosophy shaped landscapes on a grand scale. The gentle, meandering curve of a canal was often a deliberate calculation to slow the water's velocity, preventing it from scouring away its own banks. But that same curve, when viewed from a hillside, created a graceful, serpentine line through the valley, a feature that felt intuitively right because it mirrored the natural flow of a stream. The infrastructure blended into the scenery, becoming a part of the pastoral ideal rather than an industrial scar upon it. This fusion reached its zenith in places like the stepwells of India. Their breathtaking geometric symmetry, with thousands of steps descending into the earth in perfect pyramidal order, was a direct response to the need for access to a fluctuating water table. But the resulting space was cool, serene, and acoustically marvelous, a subterranean temple to water. The ornate carvings of deities on the walls did not hinder the well's function, they sanctified it, reminding every user that this was a sacred trust. The logic was deeply cultural and psychological. A magnificently engineered aqueduct marching across the countryside on towering arches was a permanent advertisement for the state's sophistication and benevolent power. A beautifully carved fountainhead in a public square turned the act of collecting water into a daily encounter with civic pride. When people cherish a structure not just for what it does, but for how it makes them feel, they are far more likely to protect it, to maintain it, and to pass its care onto their children. This artistic expression varied wildly across cultures, yet always obeyed an underlying mathematical truth. The Incas' water channels were austerely beautiful in their precise, seamless stonework, a reflection of a society that valued order, unity, and flawless execution. In contrast, the Persian gardens of Pasargadae, with their elaborate networks of rills and pools, were designed as representations of paradise, where the controlled flow of water symbolized cosmic order and royal grace. Whether ornate or starkly geometric, each style was a dialect in the universal language of hydraulic necessity. The curve, the slope, the proportion, all were dictated by the relentless laws of physics, but the hand that executed them was guided by a culture's soul. This invites us to look at the ruins of these places with new eyes, to see the worn step not just as access to water, but as a line in a poem written in stone, a poem about balance, reverence, and the profound human desire to make the essential things in life not just functional, but truly beautiful. Their calculations were etched in mud, not on parchment. To build a reservoir, you must first answer a deceptively simple question: how much water will it hold? And to design a canal, you must solve another: how fast will that water move? Ancient engineers confronted these problems of volume and flow daily, and they solved them with a form of practical mathematics so advanced it functioned as geometry and even proto-calculus, long before those fields had formal names. Their logic was rooted in the tangible world, a hands-on science of approximation that yielded results of stunning accuracy for monumental projects. Consider the challenge of an irregularly shaped reservoir basin, perhaps following the natural curve of a valley. They couldn't simply plug numbers into a formula they didn't have. Instead, they relied on geometric simplification. They would break down the complex shape into a series of familiar forms, cubes, prisms, or truncated pyramids for which they had established rules. Evidence suggests cultures from Egypt to Mesopotamia had practical formulas for the volumes of such shapes, derived from generations of land surveying for taxation and construction. To calibrate these estimates, they likely used a brilliant, low-tech method, water filling. They might have built a small-scale model of the basin or a single, representative section, then carefully filled it with a known quantity of water using standardized jars. This physical test translated an abstract volume into a countable number of jars, creating a reliable conversion factor they could then scale up. It was empirical calculus, using the physical world itself as the computer. Determining flow rate in a canal was a different puzzle, one of change over time. How do you measure the speed of a liquid without a single clock or flow meter? Their solutions were elegantly direct. One common method involved a timed float. An engineer would mark a precise length of the canal, then drop a buoyant object at the start and time its journey to the end using a water clock or sandglass. The speed of the float gave a close approximation of the water's surface velocity. For more precise measurement of volume over time, they might use a known container. By diverting the entire flow of a small channel into a calibrated tank for a counted interval, they could calculate the discharge, how much water passed a point each second. This is the essence of integral calculus, measuring total accumulation from a rate of change, performed with a bucket and a timer. The Babylonian and Egyptian scribes were masters of this applied mathematics. Their clay tablets and papyri are filled with word problems about digging canals, with solutions that show a sophisticated grasp of slopes, volumes, and workforce logistics. They used standardized units like cubits and palms not just for length but for volume and slope, creating a coherent system for hydraulic planning. The logic was deeply iterative. They developed rules of thumb, perhaps noting that a canal with a certain width and a slope of 1 palm drop per 100 cubits would produce a desirable, non-erosive flow. These rules were refined through observation, becoming a body of reliable, repeatable knowledge passed down through apprenticeships. They may have lacked Leibniz's symbols or Newton's laws, but they were adept at solving the very problems calculus would later formalize. Problems of optimizing earth moved versus water stored, or predicting how quickly a reservoir would fill during a seasonal rain. The precision of their toolkit was a direct reflection of this physical, intuitive genius. The elegance of their solutions was matched only by the simplicity of their tools. The ancient engineer's toolbox held no digital screens or laser guides, yet its contents were masterpieces of applied physics, each one an extension of human perception calibrated for a single, monumental purpose, precision on a landscape scale. The most celebrated of these was the Roman chorobates, a leveling instrument that seemed almost magical in its accuracy. Picture a wooden frame, perhaps 20 feet long, with a meticulously carved groove running along its top. This groove would be filled with water, creating a perfect, self-leveling reference line. By sighting along this liquid horizon, surveyors could establish a true horizontal plane across a valley or a hillside, ensuring their aqueduct would maintain that crucial, gentle gradient for miles. It was a tool that harnessed the most reliable level known to man, the surface of still water, to conquer the uneven earth. For laying out the right angles essential to a grid of irrigation canals or the foundations of a dam, they turned to the groma. This device was a study in elegant geometry. A vertical staff held a rotating crossarm from which plumb bobs hung on strings. By aligning two opposing strings with a distant marker, an engineer could cite a perfectly straight line. Swiveling the crossarm 90 degrees and repeating the process would establish a precise perpendicular. With this simple arrangement of wood, cord, and weight, they could map the skeleton of an entire water distribution network onto the raw landscape, one right angle at a time. The daily work of measurement relied on even humbler, yet no less vital, instruments. Long measuring rods marked in standardized units like the cubit provided the basic increments of length. Knotted ropes with intervals tied at precise distances allowed for rapid surveying of longer stretches. The plumb bob, a weighted cord finding the vertical by gravity alone, ensured walls were built straight and true. These were the pencils and rulers of landscape-scale drafting. To move the colossal volumes of earth these plans demanded, the toolkit shifted to levers, woven baskets, and wooden sledges. The logic here was one of mechanical advantage and coordinated labor, using simple machines to multiply human strength. Mastering these tools was not a casual skill, it was a specialized craft, often passed down within families or guilds. Knowing how to steady a chorobates in a stiff wind, how to account for the sag in a long measuring rope, or how to direct a team to efficiently fill and carry baskets required years of apprenticeship. This hands-on knowledge was the critical bridge, the moment when abstract calculations on a clay tablet were translated into the physical cut of a shovel or the placement of a foundation stone. The tools themselves were nearly universal, but the specific techniques and the accumulated wisdom of their use became a form of intellectual currency. This craft knowledge did not stay locked within one civilization, it traveled along the Silk Road, across the Mediterranean trade networks, and down the coastlines. Ideas about water management moved with merchants, scholars, and sometimes captured engineers. A concept for a sediment trap developed in Mesopotamia might find new expression in a Persian qanat. The principle of the arch, refined by the Romans for aqueducts, would inspire later builders across continents. This was a slow, profound technological cross-pollination, where the simple, brilliant logic of the water level and the plumb line became a shared language for shaping the world. A brilliant idea is a restless traveler. The most profound engineering breakthroughs in water management were not secrets hoarded by a single civilization, but shared gifts passed hand to hand across deserts and oceans. This cross-cultural exchange of hydraulic logic created a global conversation about water, one that spanned millennia and linked empires that never knew each other's names. The journey of the qanat is a perfect map of this diffusion. Born in the arid highlands of ancient Persia, this technology of gently sloping underground tunnels was a lifeline carved into the earth. As Persian influence expanded, so did the knowledge of the qanat. It traveled west with traders and diplomats, fascinating the water-hungry Romans who adopted and adapted its principles for their own ambitious projects. It moved east along the Silk Road, reaching the oases of Afghanistan and eventually the western frontiers of China, where local engineers modified the design to suit their own unique geology. In every new home, the core logic remained: tap the aquifer and guide it with gravity, but the execution was refined by local hands and minds. The same story unfolds with the monumental arch, that graceful curve that made Roman aqueducts possible. The Romans did not invent the arch, they perfected it. They studied earlier examples from the Etruscans and the builders of the Near East, recognizing in its form a brilliant solution to spanning wide valleys. By refining the geometry and mastering the use of concrete, they transformed a structural concept into the backbone of an empire-wide water network, a technology that would later inspire engineers from medieval Europe to the Islamic world. This was not copying, it was creative adaptation. Across the Indian Ocean, the breathtaking architecture of the Indian stepwell made its own journey. Its concept, a monumental, stair-lined shaft designed to access deep, fluctuating water tables while providing a cool social space, resonated across Southeast Asia. Variations appeared in what is now Cambodia and Thailand, where local builders incorporated the design into their own temple complexes, blending it with indigenous artistic styles and spiritual beliefs. The logic of adoption was always fiercely pragmatic. A culture would encounter a foreign technology, see its utility, and then ask a crucial question: how can we make this work for our specific hills, our specific rains, our specific people? The Roman aqueduct was a marvel of imperial scale, but in a different context, the same principle of gravity-fed flow might manifest as a simple, community-built ceramic pipe system in a mountain village. This process of local improvement meant that technologies rarely stagnated. They evolved, becoming more efficient and resilient with each new iteration. This interconnected history shatters the romantic myth of the isolated genius. It presents a far more compelling truth: that human ingenuity is often a collective, cumulative project. A Roman engineer standing on his chorobates was benefiting from Persian surveying techniques, Mesopotamian mathematics, and Greek geometry. A Khmer builder aligning a reservoir with a temple tower was drawing on hydrological knowledge that had filtered through Indian and possibly even Chinese traditions. They were all contributing to a single, sprawling, centuries-long experiment in how to live with water. This global tapestry suggests that the challenge of managing this vital resource has always been a universal human endeavor, one that compelled us to share our brightest ideas across the divides of language and belief. That shared struggle often led to a shared sentiment, a profound reverence for water that transcended its mere physical utility, weaving it into the very fabric of cultural and spiritual identity. The stone conduit and the temple altar were two sides of the same sacred duty. In countless ancient societies, the water they so expertly managed was never just a physical substance. It was a living, divine force woven into the very fabric of their universe. This hydraulic cosmology transformed every reservoir and canal from a piece of infrastructure into a theological statement, a deliberate act of aligning human society with cosmic order. For the Maya, their life-giving reservoirs, or aguadas, were often carefully positioned near natural cave entrances. These caves were not geological accidents. They were seen as sacred portals to Xibalba, the watery underworld, the home of powerful rain deities and ancestors. To build a reservoir here was to tap directly into the spiritual source of all water, making its maintenance a ritual act of communion with the gods. A clogged canal was not merely a technical fault, it was an obstruction in a divine artery. This belief system provided a non-negotiable, deeply internalized motivation for every member of the community to participate in upkeep, for the consequences of neglect were spiritual as well as practical. This fusion reached its zenith in the Barre reservoirs of Angkor. These vast, geometrically perfect rectangles of water were not just for irrigation. They were designed as earthly representations of the Hindu cosmic ocean, with the central temple mountain, like Angkor Wat, symbolizing the mythical Mount Meru rising from its center. The entire city was a massive, functioning mandala, a map of the cosmos where water flow mirrored celestial harmony. The act of digging and maintaining the barre was therefore a form of collective worship, a continuous ritual to sustain the balance of the universe itself. This sacred logic meant that engineering and priesthood were frequently one and the same. The individual who calculated the slope of an aqueduct might also be the one who interpreted omens for the best day to open its sluice gates. Construction projects were consecrated with elaborate ceremonies and often aligned with solstices or planetary movements, embedding the human-made system into the rhythm of the heavens. This intertwining provided a formidable cultural inertia for sustainability. A reservoir protected by ritual, myth, and divine decree was far more resilient than one protected by royal decree alone. Its care was encoded in stories, festivals, and prayers, passed down through generations long after the original political power that built it had faded. The system became a sacred trust, its preservation a measure of cultural integrity. We see this legacy in the stepwells of India, where every descent for water was a spiritual pilgrimage, and in the water temples of Bali that still govern the Subak irrigation cooperatives today. This profound fusion asks us to consider what we have lost in our modern separation of the technical and the sacred. When a dam is only a concrete utility, where is the story that compels a community to cherish it for 1,000 years? The ancient builders understood that for something to truly endure, it must live not just in the landscape but in the soul of the people. Their blueprints are not locked in museums, they are flowing through fields and city pipes right now. The most astonishing validation of this ancient logic is not found in ruins, but in the living pulse of systems that have never stopped working, some for over 2,000 years. These are not preserved relics behind glass, they are functional infrastructure, still performing the exact job they were designed for, a continuous dialogue between the past and the present. In the Sichuan province of China, the Duzhongyan irrigation system, conceived in the 3rd century before the Common Era, is not a historical site you simply visit, it is a landscape you witness in action. Its elegant division of the Min River still operates without a single dam in the modern sense, using the same principles of natural leverage and spillover to water over 5,000 square kilometers of farmland today, feeding millions of people. It has survived dynasties, wars, and earthquakes because its design is an agreement with the river, not a declaration of war against it. Across the world, in the heart of Rome, the Aqua Virgin Aqueduct, originally completed in the year 19 before the Common Era, still carries fresh spring water into the city. It feeds the Trevi Fountain and the fountains of Piazza Navona, meaning the water that cascades beneath Bernini's sculptures today follows the same stone channels laid by Roman engineers. The Qattara tunnels of Morocco, centuries-old underground channels, remain the lifeblood for oasis agriculture. Their gentle, gravity-fed seep a sustainable alternative to the draining electric pumps that threaten modern aquifers. These are not accidents of survival, they are the direct result of a design philosophy that prioritized passive resilience. They rely on gravity, the one force that never fails. They were built with materials chosen for longevity, like self-healing concrete or compacted clay, not for cheap speed, and they were embedded within social and management structures that valued long-term stewardship over short-term gain. Today, modern hydraulic engineers study these systems not as historical curiosities, but as masterclasses in sustainable design. They are case studies in how to manage a watershed holistically, how to build with local, durable materials, and how to create infrastructure that adapts to stress rather than fracturing under it. The continued operation of a 2,000-year-old water network forces a humbling re-evaluation of what we call advanced technology. Is it the most complex, energy-intensive solution, or is it the one that functions silently, efficiently, and repair-free for generations? These legacy systems stand as a quiet, profound critique of our own infrastructure culture, which often values immediate cost and dramatic scale over enduring function. They point toward principles we are now scrambling to relearn, like designing for a 1,000-year flood instead of a 50-year one, or using nature's own processes as our guide. In their silent, persistent flow, they ask us the most urgent question of all: what are we building today that will still be here, still serving its purpose, when our own names are just fragments in the sediment? The echo of their logic is now a blueprint for our future. We are witnessing a profound renaissance in engineering, not through new materials, but through a recovered philosophy where the ancient principles of working with nature are being rebranded with modern names like biomimicry and sustainable design. The parallels are not coincidental. They are a testament to a universal truth about resilient systems. Consider the modern concept of the sponge city, pioneered in places like China to combat urban flooding. Instead of channeling every drop of stormwater into concrete drains as fast as possible, these cities are designed to absorb rainfall where it falls. They use permeable pavements, green roofs, and strategically placed parks that act like urban wetlands, slowing down runoff, filtering pollutants, and recharging groundwater. This is not a new idea. It is a direct, sophisticated echo of the ancient Maya, who integrated their reservoirs with the surrounding jungle and wetland ecosystems, or the Hohokam, who designed their canal networks to work with, not against, the desert's flash flood rhythm. The core logic is identical. See the city not as separate from the watershed, but as an active, porous part of it. This return to biological templates is everywhere in contemporary practice. Modern engineers combating soil erosion on highway embankments or denuded hillsides now routinely plant vetiver grass. Its dense, deep root system acts as a living net, holding soil in place with remarkable strength. This is not a modern discovery. It is the same principle embodied in the sculpted hillsides of the Inca or the rice terraces of Bali, where the roots of cultivated plants were the primary structural reinforcement for entire mountainsides. The ancient terracing was a form of large-scale bioremediation, and we are relearning that lesson today. Even our most advanced water filtration plants are looking to nature's original design, mimicking the way wetland plants and microbial communities naturally cleanse water. But ancient civilizations from Mesopotamia to Sri Lanka were already engineering their reservoirs to support such aquatic life, understanding that a healthy ecosystem within the tank meant cleaner water for irrigation. This represents a full-circle moment for human ingenuity. After a century of relying on brute force engineering, massive energy inputs, and centralized control, the limitations of that approach are starkly clear in the face of climate volatility. Today's pioneers are looking back to these ancient models precisely because they offer low-energy, high-resilience solutions. They are decentralized, adaptable, and built from local knowledge. The question is no longer whether these principles work. The 2,000-year-old dam still holding water is proof enough. The urgent question now is how we systematically integrate this recovered wisdom into 21st century policy, education, and construction codes. It requires more than just adopting a few techniques like green roofs. It demands a fundamental shift in perspective, a move away from viewing infrastructure as a static, isolated object and toward seeing it as a dynamic participant in a living system. It means training the next generation of engineers to think like ecologists first, to read a landscape with the same patient, holistic observation as the ancient surveyor with his chorobates. The future of our cities and our water security may depend less on a revolutionary new polymer and more on our willingness to listen to the echoes of a logic that has been whispering to us through stone and sediment for millennia. The straight concrete channel is a symbol of a broken conversation. For much of the modern era, our engineering philosophy toward water has been one of brute force simplification, viewing rivers as unruly plumbing to be straightened, dammed, and forced into submission. This approach of conquest delivered immense short-term benefits, but often at a hidden, accumulating cost, silting up reservoirs, eroding deltas, and severing the vital connections between a river and its floodplain. The ancient logic presents a stark and necessary alternative, a paradigm not of control but of symbiosis. Their goal was never to defeat a watershed, but to become a conscious, beneficial part of it. This represents a fundamental shift from a dominator model to a partnership model with the environment, where we often see a river as an obstacle or a resource to be fully exploited. They saw it as a living system with its own rhythms and intelligence, a partner in a perpetual dialogue. The Great Tanks of Sri Lanka were not just storage, they were artificial wetlands that mimicked and enhanced natural hydrological functions, supporting fisheries and recharging groundwater. The Dujongyan system works because it negotiates with the Min River, using its own energy to divide its flow, rather than confronting it with a wall of concrete. This philosophy reframes the engineer not as an external master imposing order, but as a skilled participant within a complex system. The most resilient and enduring works are those that acknowledge this embedded role, designing structures that adapt to stress, absorb shocks, and even improve the ecological health of the landscape they occupy. This shift in thinking is no longer a historical curiosity. It is an urgent necessity for addressing our interconnected water and climate crises. How then do we cultivate this symbiotic mindset in our own communities and institutions? It begins, as it always has, with education and narrative. We must learn to read our local watersheds again, to understand where our water comes from and where it goes. But beyond data, we need new stories. The ancient reservoirs were surrounded by myth and ritual that taught every generation their place within the water cycle. Our modern equivalents might be citizen science projects, community-designed rain gardens, or policies that value a river's health as much as its utility. It means teaching engineers to think like ecologists and communities to see themselves as stewards of a living system. The paradigm shift is ultimately a shift in identity, from seeing ourselves as separate controllers of nature to recognizing that we are, and always have been, active participants within its most essential flows. The classroom itself can become a living laboratory, powered by the silent genius of the past. There is a profound pedagogical power in these ancient water systems, a chance to reframe how we teach science, technology, engineering, and mathematics not as abstract formulas, but as a deeply human story of survival and creativity. Imagine a physics lesson that begins not with a textbook diagram, but with the question of how the Romans maintained a gradient of 1 in 100 for 50 miles. Students could calculate the forces at play, the pressure on the arches, the energy required to lift that volume of water, all grounded in a tangible, awe-inspiring achievement. The Inca canals, cut with such precision that water flows without turbulence, become a masterclass in fluid dynamics and material science, exploring how friction and slope were managed with stone tools. This is interdisciplinary learning at its most potent, where geometry meets ecology, where politics meets art, and where engineering is revealed not as a cold technical field, but as a cultural force that shapes civilizations. The logic is one of relevance and inspiration. By studying the Dujongyan system, a student learns about environmental adaptation, about designing with natural forces rather than against them, lessons directly applicable to our own climate challenges. A project to model a Mesopotamian irrigation network on a sand table teaches systems thinking, resource allocation, and even early principles of computer logic through the flow of water itself. These are not just historical case studies, they are functional prototypes of sustainable design tested across millennia. Museums and science centers are already harnessing this potential with breathtaking tools. Through detailed three-dimensional modeling and immersive virtual reality, anyone can now stand on the crest of a Roman aqueduct, look down its seemingly endless arcade, and grasp the monumental scale of the endeavor. You can virtually descend the steps of Chand Bayori, feeling the temperature drop, understanding its dual role as infrastructure and social sanctuary. This technology transforms abstract knowledge into embodied experience, making the ingenuity of the past viscerally real. The ultimate goal is to cultivate a new generation of problem solvers who think in terms of resilience and symbiosis. By presenting these ancient systems as brilliant solutions rather than primitive antecedents, we reframe the narrative of progress. It challenges the assumption that newer is always better, and instead asks, what timeless principles of design have we overlooked? How can we combine our advanced materials and computational power with this ancient wisdom of working with watersheds? Making this knowledge compelling means connecting it directly to the world outside the classroom. Community projects to restore a local creek using natural flow patterns, or to design a rain garden for a schoolyard, become practical applications of this ancient logic. It demonstrates that sustainability is not a futuristic concept, but a recoverable art. The stories of these reservoirs and canals teach us that the most enduring solutions are often those that are beautiful, equitable, and woven into the fabric of community life. They offer a powerful antidote to despair, showing that humanity has faced and overcome profound environmental constraints before, not with magic, but with meticulous observation, collective effort, and a deep reverence for the systems that sustain us. This legacy is not a closed book, but an open invitation to look at our own landscapes with new yet ancient eyes. Stone conduits at Tiwanaku were cut with a precision that mocks our assumptions. High in the Bolivian Altiplano, the builders of this ancient city fitted massive blocks of andesite stone so perfectly that their water channels show no sign of mortar, yet they directed flows with uncanny accuracy. The enduring mystery is not the design, but the execution. How did they transport these multi-ton stones across miles of rugged terrain, and with what tools did they achieve such flawless, watertight joins? The sheer scale of the labor defies simple explanation, suggesting a social organization and a mastery of leverage and transport that we are still piecing together. It is a puzzle of both physics and logistics, where each new survey of the quarries and roadways adds complexity rather than closure. Beneath the rose-red cliffs of Petra, another kind of mystery flows in the dark. We marvel at the city's carved facades and surface conduits, but its true hydraulic genius may lie hidden. Ground-penetrating radar has revealed tantalizing hints of a vast, unexplored subterranean network, channels and cisterns carved deep into the bedrock. What was the full extent of this hidden system? Did it serve as a secret emergency supply during siege, or as a means of managing groundwater to prevent the very flash floods that carved the canyon? Each scan produces a ghostly map of voids and channels, a labyrinth we have yet to physically enter, guarding secrets about how a city thrived in one of the most arid regions on Earth. In the humid lowlands of ancient Mexico, the Olmec present a paradox of absence. As masters of their environment, they erected colossal stone heads and built great ceremonial centers, yet they left little clear evidence of the reservoirs or dams we would expect. How did they manage water in a land of seasonal deluges and dry spells? The answer may lie in a form of landscape engineering so subtle it has eluded us. Some researchers now propose that the Olmec did not build conspicuous tanks, but instead sculpted the very terrain, creating gentle swalls and redirecting natural wetlands to control water on a massive, decentralized scale. Their handiwork might be invisible to the untrained eye, woven into the topography itself, waiting to be recognized not as a structure, but as a pattern. This is the compelling logic of modern inquiry, where every answered question births two new ones. A LiDAR scan that reveals a lost canal in Cambodia immediately prompts questions about its water source and the society that maintained it. The chemical analysis of reservoir sediments tells a story of drought, but then asks what cultural adaptations followed. The research is a continuous loop of discovery and mystery, pushing the boundaries of both archaeology and engineering science. These unresolved puzzles are humbling reminders that our understanding is a work in progress. They suggest that the ancients may have possessed insights or applied techniques we have not yet conceived, solutions born from a different relationship with the material world. What future breakthrough might finally illuminate these shadows? Perhaps it will be a new form of subsurface imaging that can distinguish between natural stone and worked stone from orbit, or a subtle chemical tracer that can map ancient water flows long after the channels have silted shut. The quest itself is what fuels a vital dialogue across time. Each generation brings new tools to the old stones, and in return, those stones pose new challenges to our modern assumptions. The mysteries are not merely gaps in a historical record. They are invitations to keep looking, to keep wondering how the silent, enduring logic of water was once translated into stone. The silent flow of a Roman aqueduct and the mirrored surface of a Sri Lankan tank are more than ruins. They are conversations with the future. Our journey through the logic of these ancient water masters uncovers a legacy not of primitive effort, but of profound brilliance, built on patient observation, elegant adaptation, and a deep respect for the forces of nature. We have traced their steps from reading the whispers of a landscape to forging materials that defied time, from organizing communities to weaving water into the very fabric of their cosmology. These systems stand as monuments to a holistic intelligence where the technical, the social, and the spiritual were inseparable strands of a single, resilient cord. Their most enduring lesson is disarmingly simple yet radically profound. True sustainability emerges not from conquest but from collaboration. It is the art of designing with a watershed, not against it, of seeing humanity as a participant within a living system. As we confront our own era of deepening water scarcity and climatic disruption, these ancient blueprints offer far more than a historical curiosity. They provide a compass for resilient thinking, a testament to solutions that are decentralized, low energy, and inherently adaptable. They remind us that longevity is measured not in decades, but in centuries, and that such endurance is always a cultural achievement as much as an engineering one. Let this exploration be a call to look backward for inspiration as we build forward, to recover the wisdom of symbiosis in an age that desperately needs it. If this dive into ancient ingenuity resonated with you, consider subscribing for more journeys into the enduring mysteries of our past. We would love to hear which of these water systems fascinates you most. Was it the mathematical precision of the Roman aqueduct, the spiritual geometry of Anka's Barres, or the living intelligence of Bali's Subak? Share your thoughts in the comments.